Hey viewers, both new and old, today marks the beginning of my tropical bonsai journey. I live in Florida, south of Miami, in hardiness zone 11A, so a lot of the bonsai options that are available to me are not necessarily very common, at least in the continental United States. And so I thought that maybe I could do some good by documenting my journey, and hopefully down the line, people making the same YouTube and Google searches that I've been making will have a little bit better of a resource to rely on. As you can see, we've already started out with a nice pink Bougainvillea. I bought this one just from Home Depot. They usually just have a ton in my area, and I just looked at all of them to try to see which ones had the best trunk. So this one looked like it had a pretty nice trunk, and the roots were also kind of interesting. You can see here. So I took it home, ended up taking it out of the pot and obviously washing everything down, and then taking off just a little bit of the roots so I could maybe get it into a better pot for a bonsai tree. I also made sure to save this little succulent that somehow made it into the pot, so I can use it as a little accent plant when I put the tree into the new pot. So you'll see in a minute that the tree is now in a plastic training pot. I just bought like a pack of 20 off of Amazon. So now I'm just gonna go through and take off some of those bigger leaves with my hands. Just make the tree look a little bit more proportional, and it also helps me see kind of what I want to do with the different branches and what I'm going to do in the long run in terms of wiring and training. So this is how the trunk looks. I picked the front of the tree kind of just based off of what angle I like looking at the roots the best. Now I'm coming in with some scissors and just defoliating some more leaves, as well as directionally pruning some of the smaller branches. I took a little cutting off this Bougainvillea, just dipped the bottom into some rooting hormone to plant it alongside that succulent that I mentioned earlier. Can't really remember off the top of my head if that thing is still alive, but I don't think it is. So maybe I have to take a bigger cutting off these Bougainvilleas to actually get it to root, but whatever happened, I don't think it's actually there anymore. I was out of good bonsai wire when I did the initial repotting and styling on this thing, so I just took some much thicker wire and zip tied it to this one branch that I knew I really wanted to pull down. And you'll see as the progress on this tree continues in this video, I've actually taken this off and wired it up properly, so it didn't actually end up staying like this for probably longer than a couple of weeks. So this ended up being the initial styling for the tree right after I took it home from Home Depot. And then after this, I just put it in a full sun location and let it sit for a while so it could start growing. It did not take long for this tree to start to flower. Only a couple weeks after I cut it back and put it in its new pot, there were a ton of buds everywhere, and you can see the pink flowers actually starting to form. I wasn't able to get quite the best video that I would have liked from this stage of the tree, so I included some pictures here for you guys to look at also. And then finally, here's what the tree looks like today. The flowers are nice and mature, and honestly, they're kind of so big you can't really see any of the structure of the tree anymore, but I enjoy looking at it, and it kind of looks cool even from far away when you can't necessarily tell it's a bonsai. It's just really vibrant, and it's probably the plant that stands out most in my garden. Maybe have some competition from some of the orchids, but those things don't flower nearly as prolifically as the Bougainvilleas do. Not sure how long I'll be able to leave the wire on this tree, but it hasn't started biting yet, so I'll just keep an eye out on it. The next tree I want to show off is this epic cutting off a big Kapok tree that the nursery on my specific island has out front. Took me almost a year of going there to realize that they had these cuttings growing in the back, so I grabbed one of these for $60, and you can see it's the white silk Kapok Tree variety because of this flower that came on it. I think this thing only lasted about 1 day before it fell off, but it's probably good. I think I want this tree more so focused on growing roots than I want it flowering. The tree came in a pretty big pot from the nursery, so I ended up building a 2-foot by 2-foot wooden box to plant it in. And I just used 2x4s and doubled up on them, so it's 2x4s tall, however tall that is, like 3¼ inches times 2, something like that. But this will give it a lot of room for the roots to stretch out, and you'll see soon here that this thing has a nice root base, but it's not too big, so it could grow in this big box for probably quite a while. But along with allowing the roots to grow out, it also stops them from growing down into the dirt. You can't see here, but I had a piece of plywood at the bottom, so this will help sort of start develop these roots in a more bonsai style. And ultimately, when I want to repot this tree, it's not going to be basically an impossible task to dig it up and put it into a proper bonsai pot, like it would be if it was just, you know, placed out into the yard in the pea rock and the dirt, not in its own self-contained box. I haven't done any actual training on the Kapok tree yet. I just replanted it and have been letting it grow. The only 2 things I did is, you can see 2 little things of bonsai wire that I just tied the tree into the pot so it doesn't get knocked over as easily. And then the second thing that I did is when I took it out of the big black pot in the background, you see there, I dug the dirt out from around the base of the trunk a little bit to reveal more of that root flare and actually get the tree planted where it needs to be. Next on the list is a bunch of green Island Ficuses that I actually got from the same place I got my Kapok tree from. I bought this big bucket for $45, and there was probably maybe 6 or 7 individual plants in there, not to mention how easily these things propagate from cutting, so this one $45 bucket probably provided me with as many green Island Ficuses as I could possibly want. So I had to even get creative with what I was going to use them all for, and you'll see that here. For the first ficus, I decided that I would just put it out in the yard and let it grow tall. I have this rock in the corner that's concave at the top, so I just put some dirt in that, and I'm going to let this thing go. Hopefully it looks pretty cool with its aerial roots in a few years. I've been watering it pretty much every day. Next, we got a little bit of a sneak peek from a video I'm actually still working on. I have 2 36-inch by 18-inch exoterras that don't have anything in them. I used to be keeping snakes in them, but they've long outgrown them, so I decided to build a nice little background in this one and plant it up with some ficuses as well as some oyster plants, and then you'll see just a Hawaiian pothos, and we'll see what else I can find from the yard to put in there. There's actually a mangrove I got from the ocean that's growing in there as well. I don't have the animals that I plan to populating this tank yet, but that doesn't mean that we don't still have a couple of things. First is this little ashy gecko that my girlfriend caught in her office and let me put in the tank. So he's running around. I'm hoping that he's eating a couple of the ants that we have infesting the tank right now. If you live in a tropical area and keep terrariums, I'd love to hear any sort of methods to stop ant invasions. I don't really have any great ones as of now, besides putting something in there that would eat them. This was a really cool shot where I just thought that the scale of the enclosure looked nice. The little tiny ashy gecko looked like a big monitor lizard climbing around through a regular-sized river. And the other inhabitant is this little tiny greenhouse frog that I caught outside in the backyard. And this frog is not photogenic at all, so unfortunately this is the only film I actually have of it so far. And finally, back to bonsai, I used the last 2 green island ficuses to start a nice little planting. I started off by removing all the yellow dying leaves just with my hands. Next, I wanted this thing to stand more upright, so I just lifted it out of the pot as hard as I could, which was pretty hard with all those aerial roots growing into it. And then just took this rock and kind of shoved it in between the 2 ficuses and the edge of the pot, so it didn't have any real choice other than to stand up. I also always love seeing root over rock ficuses, so I'm hoping that some of that action will start developing here. Once I was finally happy with how the tree was standing up, I added some cocoa coir and then some sphagnum moss over top. Both these substrates just do a good job at holding water, so I'm hoping maybe that'll help the aerial roots grow a little bit quicker on these ficuses. Now that we're all set up, I'm going to do some initial pruning on this tree just to get it to look a little bit more like a tree and less like a big bush. This part is pretty subjective, and I don't know about you, but it's pretty fun for me to just cut things back. I don't know why, but I really enjoyed kind of trimming this ficus back. And not only was I doing that, but I was creating a bunch of other ficus cuttings that I ended up putting in a pot together. So I'll have some more to deal with one day. Here I am wiring up the first branch. This is actually the only branch of the smaller of the 2 ficus trees that are in this planting. I train the branch downwards and out. That's a pretty typical way to style branches on a bonsai tree, and the reasoning for that is it kind of mimics the look of an old, aged limb that has so much weight on it that it's now starting to droop down to the ground. After a couple more wiring and pruning decisions, the tree was really starting to come along and look more like how I wanted it to. Ficuses are really prolific at backbudding, so I cut this thing kind of bare to begin with, knowing that those same leaves will start growing back up towards the middle of the tree, just as long as I give it time. You can see I really got to pull to get some of these cuttings out of the pot. And finally, here's our green Island Ficus after its initial styling. I let it grow in that pot for another month and a half, maybe 2 months, and then took it back out and put it in its own wooden box to start training up the roots to get a little bit more of a bonsai structure to them. As you can see also, I added one more rock to the planting to sort of get that second smaller tree elevated a little bit more out of the pot. And we also have a ton of backbudding going on, so we'll have a lot of decisions to make in the future. Next, I want to show you guys my 2 pink Powderpuff trees that I got from, surprise, surprise, the same nursery I got the Kapok and the Green Island Ficus trees from. I got both of these trees actually planted in the same pot together, and that thing was crazy root bound, so I know that they must have been sitting there at the nursery for probably years at that point. And because these things are so root bound and were sitting for so long, they both have a really nice root base on them, and they're both kind of really unique in their own ways. But with the good also comes the bad, and kind of for the same reason that the base of these trees is so developed is also the reason that both of them kind of have a little bit of a reverse taper going on. I suspect that as they were sitting in their pot over the years, and they grew and grew, eventually branches would get trimmed off, and it looks like all those branches actually got trimmed off to the same point on the tree, so it wouldn't keep getting taller. But an unfortunate side effect of that is that we have some reverse taper where the top of the tree almost looks like it might be thicker than the bottom of it. Nothing that we can't fix, and I'll be carving away at these things, but it'll take time to get it to where the top of this tree is in line with how thick the base is. Speaking of bases, this first one has a nice little deadwood feature in the base. I'm interested to see how this grows as the years go on. I'm not really sure if it'll try to engulf it or if it'll just only grow around. And then finally, before we get out here, I also want to show you guys my firebush bonsai. When I bought it, it was almost completely defoliated, as you can see, so I got a really nice view at what the trunk looked like, as well as a couple little deadwood features up towards the top of this plant. And then fast forwards, here's what the firebush looks like today, also potted up in a nice little wooden box. And you can see that root base down there. I actually didn't know that it looked like this. It was all covered in dirt, so that's a nice little surprise. Although it does look like there's a secondary root growing over top of that big ground root, so I might have to cut that thing back. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far, maybe consider subscribing and liking the video. We'd love to have you guys back. This is kind of a new style of video for me, but I really have enjoyed showing how things develop over the course of a couple of months, and I think that's probably a good time frame going forwards in this series to show you guys updates to not only the trees that I've shown you guys today, but also the ones that I'm sure I'll be getting in the future. I hope this was a nice little relaxing video. I also did the music myself, so let me know if you guys like that, and I'll see you next time.